Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Kendrick. Hello, everybody. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. So the opt-out deadline has come and passed. I think the final tally for the NFL was 67 players had officially opted out. There were some big names towards the deadline. I know Tre'Davious White, who we are going to talk about here later in the show. I know that he was really contemplating opting out. Of course, Von Miller had contemplated opting out. There were a few other players that were thinking about it, but ultimately, I even saw some players say that they needed more time. I think it might have been Jamie Collins. I can't quite remember, so do not hold me to that. But I did see one NFL player say that he felt like people needed more time, that the players actually needed more time to think about this. Of course, Devin McCourty, he came out and he said that he hated the fact that the NFL had extended the deadline because it was going to give players more time to opt out, and that was something he didn't want. So again, it's just contrasting opinions, how they feel about everything, but nonetheless, the opt-out date has come and gone. So I think at this point in time, if any player wanted to opt out, I don't think the league can necessarily stop them, but at the same time, I'm sure there's some kind of ramifications, maybe a fine, because maybe they wouldn't be able to get the actual compensation if they were to try and opt out. I know that Vic Beasley, who signed with the Titans in the offseason, he only just now, reported to the facility for COVID testing. They had fined him $500,000. So it was just a whole mess, right? There are so many people, they are not quite sure what to think about this virus. They are not quite sure whether or not to opt out or what to do. So as I've said on numerous occasions, this is just a very touchy subject, and the fans need to really be careful about how they judge these players. But anyways, so we got a lot to get into today. I want to get into Derek Carr. He had some comments about why he didn't decide to opt out, and I thought they were very interesting. I want to talk about that. Tre'Davious White, I want to get into him because he was receiving some very interesting hate, and Deion Sanders had a interesting tweet about players that are opting out. I want to get into that. Derrius Guice has been caught up in some legal trouble, to say the least, and it's very, very serious allegations against him, and I don't even think they're allegations. I think that, given what I have seen, that it did happen, and he is no longer a member of the Washington football team. He's no longer in the NFL at the moment. I'll get into some of that. And then I want to give you guys my top 10 NFL offenses that, how would I say it? I'm going to predict what the top 10 NFL offenses are going to be in the league this season. So I want to get into all of that later in the show. Anyways, so in my first podcast that I did, I said that one of my top storylines heading into this NFL season revolved around the Raiders, because it seemed like people forgot, and for good reason. Obviously, we have had way more important things to worry about than sports this 2020, all 2020. We've had more important things to worry about, so it's very, very reasonable for people to forget about it. But going back to the sports world, it seemed like people forgot that the Raiders were no longer in Oakland. They were now in Las Vegas. Very, very different from Oakland. And whenever a team goes to a new city, you want to sell tickets, and you want to make sure that you put a good product out there, because especially in a place like Las Vegas, they have better things to do than watch a bad football team. The Raiders are hoping to put out a good product, something that they haven't put out since 2016, when they went, 12-4, and Derek Carr was an MVP candidate, and their season just didn't really end the way that they had hoped it would, because Derek Carr got injured, and since then, they have not been the same. The team has not repeated that success. They haven't even come close to looking the same. That was really kind of the outlier year. And just like in California, the Rams, the Chargers, they have struggled to sell tickets at times because even in LA, they have more important things to worry about than football. And the Rams have been good. And they still, at times, struggle to compete at home against the opposing team's crowd. Especially if it's a fan base like the Steelers or Green Bay, a fan base that travels, they can really struggle. And the Raiders in Vegas, I thought they might experience the same thing. And a big thing that I was focusing on was the quarterback room. I don't think that John Gruden likes Derek Carr too much. Not necessarily as a person, but as a player. I think he sees Derek Carr has some flaws, and so I honestly thought Mariota could be a guy to take his job. I have always said I didn't think Mariota was used properly in Tennessee. I thought they tried to turn him into a pocket passer, when Mariota is a guy who needs to run the football. You need to let him play his game, and Tennessee never let him do it. We saw he had a pretty good jump his second year, his third, and other than that, I mean, he's battled injuries. It's kind of the same thing as Carson Wentz. He's just been battling injuries. He barely ever finishes the season healthy, but then at the same time, I don't feel like they've ever let him play his style of football. And I thought John Gruden might be the guy to let Mariota do that. Nonetheless, Derek Carr last week, he was asked by Jerry McDonald, who is of the Oakland Tribune, and Jerry McDonald basically asked him if he had thought about opting out, and Derek Carr said in a quote, "Did I think about opting out? I did not. I have a lot to prove to myself. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I'm tired of being disrespected. There was no question I was going to play this year." Now, Derek Carr has been with the Raiders for 6 seasons. He's been decent, but he has 55 career losses, which are the second most of any quarterback through their first 6 seasons. Last year they went 7-9. Derek Carr in his career has 1 winning season. And that was 2016, the year that they went 12-4. He has 1 winning season. His career record is 39-55. In 2019, let's just go with his 2019 year. He had the highest checkdown rate amongst any quarterback. Since 2017, he is second in the NFL in checkdown passes completed to Phillip Rivers, and I think Phillip Rivers only has 4 more. Since 2016, Derek Carr has not had a winning record. His touchdowns haven't been where they were, in 2016, even then, he had 28. There's a lot of guys who throw 28 touchdowns. He hasn't come close to it again. I think the closest he came was 22, and then it was like 19, and then 21. I mean, he hasn't come back close to it. His interceptions have been up again. Derek Carr just has not really been that guy. And I'll always think back to when, I think it was on First Take, Max Kellerman and Stephen A. Smith, they talked about Derek Carr, and I think it was Max Kellerman said that he thought Derek Carr kind of quit on the Raiders this season. He said at times he didn't think that he wanted it. It was either this season or the past season. I can't remember which of the two. But basically he said he thought Derek Carr quit. He didn't think Derek Carr wanted it. He saw him on the field. It looked like he got hit and he was crying, and that he just didn't think Derek Carr wanted it. And Derek Carr basically backlashed on Twitter, calling out Stephen A. and Max, and then I think he even tweeted at Dana White, asking if there was a way that they could do some kind of like celebrity fighting where he could fight Stephen A. and Max Kellerman. Now, if you're trying to prove to people that you have thick skin and that you're a tough guy and that you want it, the way to not do it is to talk about how you want to fight 2 men that are like in their 50s. I think Stephen A. is in his 50s and Max Kellerman is nearing his 50s or like just entered them. So when you're Derek Carr and you're sub 30, beating up 2 men who are like old enough to be your father isn't exactly the way to prove to everyone that you're a tough guy. Alright? That makes you look like something entirely else that I'm not gonna say, due to the fact that I don't want to get reprimanded for speaking out of turn. But, Derek Carr, I mean, he does have some upsides, right? You can look there, he has some upsides. He's a very accurate passer. He is 3rd in the NFL since 2016 in terms of lowest incompletions due to the quarterback's fault. Basically meaning that if on his passes, he Whether sometimes the receiver drops it, sometimes the receiver runs the wrong route. Basically, it's not Derek Carr's fault that his incompletions have been incompletions. That he is actually a very, very accurate passer. He's third in the NFL. I think the only two guys who are above him, I think it's Drew Brees and Matt Ryan, who have been better than him. So, I mean, he's been better than Patrick Mahomes, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers. I mean, he's been better than a lot of these other guys. But then the other problem with Derek Carr is that his yards per attempt, his average depth of target hasn't been good. I think at one point in September, I think it was like on September 24th, there was an article that was posted about Derek Carr, and it said that his average depth per attempt was like tied for the fourth lowest in the NFL. He's a big check down guy. And it's kind of a bummer because in his 2016 year, I think PFF said that he was either the best or among the best deep ball throwers in the league. Derek Carr has always been more mobile than I think even he gives himself credit for, because there are numerous occasions where he has all the opportunity to run, but he decides not to. And it's not like he's slow like a Brady or a Peyton Manning or an Eli. He doesn't necessarily have Lamar Jackson speed. But does he have Russell Wilson speed? I think he's faster than Patrick Mahomes. You know, he can make some stuff happen with his legs, but the problem is that he just doesn't. He'd rather throw the ball away or take a check down or just make the wrong play. But his negative throws over his 2 years under John Gruden have significantly gone down. And this past season, given the fact they were 7-9, even though he was, he had the highest check down rate, he was the 11th best quarterback that year. So he was better than Brady. He was better than Rodgers. He was better than a lot of these other guys. He was just right outside of the top 10. I do think Derek Carr does get a lot of crap. And I do think he does get disrespected. People talk about him like he's a way worse quarterback than he is. But it's the same thing I feel like with Matthew Stafford. People, they look at his arm strength, and they look at his talent, and they say, oh, but Matthew Stafford, he's such a great quarterback. But Matthew Stafford hasn't won anything. Barely have the Lions had a winning record. He's never won a playoff game. What has Matthew Stafford won? And I also point out the thing, he doesn't really beat winning teams. Against winning teams, he has a terrible record. Against losing teams, he will beat up on losing teams. But at the end of the day, 10 years with the Lions, he hasn't won a playoff game. And yet he is still their starter, and I don't quite understand it. I remember I saw there were some reports saying that the Lions, with their pick, if they don't take Jeff Okudah, like if Tua was to still be there or whatever, they might go ahead and try and draft him, that they might actually look to take a quarterback, that they should probably think about taking a quarterback, because what is Stafford doing for them? This past season, even though Pro Football Focus said he was playing great, he was having like the best season of his career, when he got hurt, what were they, 3-4-1? They still weren't winning anything. And I'm not saying that Detroit necessarily surrounds Stafford with the best weapons, with the best offensive line. I'm not saying they have necessarily surrounded him perfectly. There are even people in the organization who were used to be in the organization who have said, former teammates of Stafford who have come out and said they love Stafford and they think he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. They just feel like Detroit has failed him when it comes to personnel. That might very well be true. But the stats are the stats, and the stat is that Stafford doesn't win. He just doesn't win. People have always brought up, he doesn't have a marquee win. What is his big win? When people think about Stafford's big victory, I think there's like only 2 games you can really think of, and I think it's either his win when he busted his arm, or his collarbone, or when he beat New England in 2018 in like game number 4 of the season, and it didn't mean anything, right? I mean, those are the only victories. There's no big comeback win in the playoffs to think of. There's nothing like that. Kirk Cousins, he has I think 2 signature wins. I think you can either say it's his you like that game where he came back 20 plus points against the Buccaneers, or when he beat Drew Brees in the playoffs. I mean, even Kirk Cousins has a signature game. He has a signature win. Stafford doesn't. And I think that is something Derek Carr suffers from. Sure, Derek Carr puts up these good numbers. His completion percentage, sure, it's up there. Right? He throws a good, accurate ball. He always is like north of 4,000 yards. He's always throwing about 20 touchdowns or so. His interceptions usually hang around like 10, 9, something like that. But what are they winning? Again, Derek Carr, 6 years with the Raiders. He has one winning season. And I'm not saying that even the Raiders have necessarily surrounded him with the best pieces. For a lot of his career, the Raiders defense has been bad. Right? Even in 2016, the Raiders defense was not good. But the thing was that the Raiders offense was just able to outscore people, and I think the Raiders defense, they got like some timely, they got timely turnovers. Khalil Mack was still there, and he was a monster for them. But other than that, I mean, I get it. The Raiders, they haven't necessarily surrounded them with the best pieces in the world. Derek Carr has had to make up for some deficiencies, and at times his own deficiencies do get exposed. But the being disrespected part, as much as I agree with it, it's not like Derek Carr goes out there every week and is lighting it up, and we can see that his defense is failing him, or we can see it's just he has an unlucky break, or it's the reffing. It's none of that. No, it's literally that Derek Carr, he needs 15 yards, he takes a check down and they get like 6 yards, and so they end up punting and the game is over. Or it's that Derek Carr has a perfect lane to run, and he just for whatever reason forgets that he has legs, and he doesn't get the first down, and they end up punting the ball or whatever it is, and they end up losing the game. It's that the Raiders have only had one winning season under you, dude. I mean, that is why people have a problem with Derek Carr. It's not because he's not a nice guy. It's not because it's not because of anything off the field. It's strictly what they see on the field. Now again, Pro Football Focus, they graded him as the 11th best quarterback last season. I think that is his highest ranking since his 2016 year when he was an MVP candidate. Again, the Raiders haven't always surrounded them with the best pieces. They drafted Henry Ruggs. The offensive line is still intact. You get Josh Jacobs back, who was a great rookie last year. Probably should have won Rookie of the Year, but he didn't. Lost it out to Kyler for obvious reasons. One is a quarterback, one is a running back. They usually tend to lean one way they usually try to lean quarterback whenever it is that they can. And I'm not going to argue and try and say that it was wrong, because I think Kyler Murray's very good, and I think he will only get better. He's basically like an even smaller or quicker Russell Wilson, if you want to say it like that. But with Derek Carr, this is, again, why I think this season could be very, very pivotal for him to even stay with the Raiders. The Raiders at this point in time could move off of Derek Carr, no problem. There was the controversy in the offseason. Would they go for Brady over Derek Carr? How would they do it? If you go by the Pro Football Focus grades and his QBR, they would have downgraded by grabbing Brady. But the thing that you look at with Brady is that he's always been a winner in New England. Even in college, the dude was a winner. He's never quite looked the part, right? He's never quite looked the athlete, had the speed, had the strength, but the thing is that he just wins. He makes the right decision. He's phenomenal. He's the GOAT of all quarterbacks. But by the Pro Football Focus measures, he would have been a downgrade. But the thing is that would the Raiders have been able to just maximize him for a year or two? Could they have won with him? Maybe they could have. I don't know if I would have signed off on that. But them bringing in Mariota, I do not think that they've brought in Mariota simply because they want to have a solid backup. Right? We've seen teams in what they will do if they just need a backup quarterback, i.e. the Seattle Seahawks. They bring in Geno Smith. Geno Smith is no threat to Russell Wilson, but they brought him in because he gives you a backup. The Jets, they brought in Joe Flacco. I don't think Joe Flacco is any threat to Sam Darnold at this stage of his career, but they brought him in. He's a good backup. When you bring in a guy like a Mariota, when you bring in a guy like a Cam Newton to, quote, be your backup, when you bring in, Jameis Winston in New Orleans, I think is a bit of a different case. Jameis Winston, he just needs to get his act together. He needs to prove he can actually not throw the 30 interceptions. He needs to prove he can just not be a turnover machine. But if you just go based off of his past season, though, most people would have said, if you bring in Jameis Winston to be your backup, it's because you want competition, right? The Bears, they bring in Nick Foles, competition. You bring in Mariota, I firmly believe it's because you want to push Derek Carr, and you want a guy who could probably take his job. You compare the stats between Mariota's time in the league and Derek Carr's time in the league, they're very, very similar. And I think the difference though with Mariota is he has shown he knows how to run. When push comes to shove, he will run. Derek Carr seems very apprehensive to do so. So Derek Carr not opting out, I think it's great for the Raiders because obviously they've gone into the season with him being the starter. They haven't voiced anything about a quarterback competition between the two. He is going to be the starter, but I think Derek Carr's on a short leash. I really do. I would not be surprised if halfway through the season, the Raiders are like they're 2-6, or they're, they could be 3-5, I don't know, something like that, right? If they have a losing record, if Derek Carr isn't performing well, I would not be surprised if Mariota got the call that he's going to be the starter going into the next week. And my hope would just be that John Gruden uses him the way that he should be used. That would be my big hope. That you use him the way that Oregon used him. Let him run. Let him throw on the run. Do not make him stand there in the pocket. Derek, I think you're a good dude. I think that you are an above average NFL quarterback. But the record is the record. And the record shows you're sub 500. You've had one winning season. And you haven't really come close to performing as well as you did that year, other than this past year, and what it gets you, 7-9. So I don't really know. I'm very interested to see what goes on with the Raiders this season. It would have been more interesting to see what they do with fans. How would the fan turnout be throughout the season? If the Raiders are doing good, does the fan turnout stay the same? Does it go up? Or if they were bad, does it go down? How do things look? I would have been very interested to see. We will have to wait, obviously, until this next NFL season, or I guess I should say whenever there's a vaccine that can actually be administered to people. But nonetheless, I am very interested to see what goes on with the Raiders this coming season. Anyways, coming up next. So, Tre'Davious White had some thoughts and had some things to say about not opting out, or about the possible decision of him opting out, and kind of the backlash that he got from fans. I want to talk about that. I think it's ridiculous, and we will get into that coming up next.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment talked about Derek Carr and some of the comments that he had to make about why it is that he chose to not opt out, and it's because he was tired of getting disrespected again. I have no problem with Derek Carr. I think he's a good quarterback. I think he's better than he even puts out there. Again, I think he can run. He just decides not to run, and I think that's an element of his game he should really think about using. But even given his 11th ranked quarterback play by by Pro Football Focus and everything, I mean, the Raiders were still, I think, 24th in the NFL in terms of scoring per game, so it's not like their offense is necessarily even putting up points. Again, Derek, if you want to be respected, if you want the disrespect to stop, you gotta start winning. Your numbers are one thing, but then what you're doing in terms of wins and losses is the big thing, right? You can put up all the numbers you want, but if you're not winning, what are you really doing for the team? You can put on a good show, but at the end of the day, if you keep taking that L, fans are going to lose interest, and fans are eventually going to want you to get replaced. But nonetheless, speaking of opt-outs, One of the big names, if not the biggest name, to kind of pay attention for as the opt-out date grew near was Tre'Davious White, who is one of the star cornerbacks of the Buffalo Bills, and he is arguably one of the best corners in the NFL. Some people would put him at number one. I personally wouldn't. I think there's I would put Stephon Gilmore over him. I would probably put a guy like Jalen Ramsey over him, but I do think that Tre'Davious White is top 5. Let me be very, very clear. I think he's top 5. I do not believe you can name 4 cornerbacks better than him, but 2 off the top of my head I think are better are Stephon Gilmore, Jalen Ramsey. You can maybe try and put Darius Slay somewhere in there, a Casey Hayward maybe, but I think it all kind of depends on your flavor, right? But nonetheless, Tre'Davious White is a great corner. He's a big reason as to why it is that the Bills defense is as good as it is. He is a big reason as to why it is that the Bills have over the last 2 seasons been, I believe, either right behind the Patriots or right in front of the Patriots as the first or second best pass defense in the league. Tre'Davious White is huge. He was a great pick for the Buffalo Bills, and he has lived up to his star potential. But Tre'Davious White was really mulling whether or not he was going to opt out. Von Miller, he also mulled whether or not he was going to opt out. There were some other big-time players who were trying to think about whether or not they were going to opt out. Some players obviously have come out and said they need more time. Some players didn't want players to have more time. Again, this is just really iffy. This is a very, very iffy time right now in the world. But Tre'Davious White ultimately decided not to opt out. But Tre'Davious White took to Twitter, and he had this to say. Crazy that me choosing my family's well-being over a game comes with so-called fans attacking and questioning me and saying I'm selfish. No, you guys are selfish for thinking that football is bigger than life. Oh, by the way, my girl's grandfather passed from COVID. You understand now? He said that on the 6th. And of course, this caused a lot of people to go ahead and respond, and I read some of the replies. There's some people who say, I don't have an option to opt out of my job, so why should you have an opportunity to opt out of your job? And there's some people who say, but Tre'Davious, this is our best chance. To I guess you could say some of the Bills fans who are trying to be nice about it, but they're still not exactly quite getting it. They're saying stuff like, oh, but Tre'Davious, this is our best chance. Brady's out of the division. The Dolphins suck. The Jets suck. The Patriots are just all disarrayed. They don't know who their starter's gonna be. This is our best chance to win. Please play. And I just think these people, they're missing the boat. I really do. I think they're just simply missing the boat. Tre'Davious White, if his girlfriend's grandfather passed away from COVID, he probably got to see how it impacted her. Maybe he even got to see how it affected her grandfather. And it probably wasn't a pretty sight. COVID, as I've said, has really messed with some people's bodies. In my last podcast, I brought up one of LSU's linebackers. He lost 30, 40 pounds when he got infected with COVID because he couldn't eat anything, right? And when you play football especially, that's a lot of weight. That's weight that you probably need. And more often than not, that is muscle weight. I've talked about it on numerous occasions about the personal trainer. I saw his before and after photos. I'm pretty sure he was native to Washington. Dude, one photo, ripped. That was pre-COVID. After COVID, the dude didn't even look recognizable. His body just, it ate away all of his muscle. You would think he's never lifted a weight in his life. How this affects everybody is just so different. But to the people out there who are trying to say, like, well, my job doesn't allow me to opt out. Why should your job get to opt out? I don't get these benefits, so why should you? Do these fans realize that it's not like these players are opting out and getting all of their money? Guys like Dante Hightower, guys like Michael Pierce, Jawan James, Marcus Cannon, some of these guys were set to make $5 million, north of $5 million, a few $1 million this coming season. You know what they're getting now? $150,000. Dante Hightower, he's getting $150,000. Jawan James, $150,000. I think Michael Pierce, I think he did opt out for health reasons, so he's getting $350,000. Marcus Cannon, I think it's the same thing. He's getting over $300,000. That money That much compared to $5 million, $8 million is nothing. That is such a drastic pay cut. On top of the pay cut that a lot of players are already taking this season. And it's not like they're getting that money per week. It's not like they're getting that per month. They're getting that for the entire season. A lot of these guys live in pretty big homes because they can afford it, because they're making the money to get it. $150,000 for a lot of these guys, for Russell Wilson, for an Aaron Rodgers, this kind of money, that is a tax write-off. Right? That's money that can just go missing, and they just sit there and go, like, okay. But to some of these other athletes, some of these, like, lower level athletes, that is a big difference in the amount of money they make, right? Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, these guys making like $30 million a year and everything. Michael Pierce is not going to make $30 million a year. Right? Dante Hightower, he's not going to make $30 million a year. None of these guys are going to make that kind of money. So their contract, every single contract that they get, every single a year of pay that they get is very important. And it's very important that they spend it well. And right now what they have all done is as these players have said, this season, forget the money, the health is more important. So let's make that very clear. It's not like these guys are opting out, getting all their pay, and then that's just it. And they're just going to sit out, they're just going to take a vacation this year. They're going to go to Malibu. And they're going to just relax and drink milk from coconuts. And take shots, right? That's not what these guys are doing. A lot of these places aren't even open to do that. Secondly, to anybody who is saying, my job doesn't get these benefits, so why should yours? You picked the profession that you're in. At the end of the day, you picked the job that you're in. If your job doesn't allow you to opt out for the year and give you a pay or whatever it is for that year, honestly, dude, tough squad. I mean, really. Tough squad. You don't like it? Dude, don't work where you work. If you don't like it, become an athlete. Go get a high-profile job. Go get a job that can pay you, if you're really good at it, can pay you $4, $5, $10, $20 million a year. Go get that job. Because you know what it comes with? It comes with certain benefits. If you don't like it, don't work at a convenience store. Don't like it? Don't work at QFC. Don't like it? Quit your desk job. But for you to try and equate your own situation, here's the thing that I agree with, right? You had some MLB player come out and talk about how he hated the fact that they were taking a pay cut. He wanted to make all of his money. That's just ridiculous. I agree everyone with taking the pay cut, because everybody, to an extent, has had to take some kind of a pay cut. Millions of people have lost their jobs. So for any athlete, for any celebrity to come out and say they feel like they should be making all of their money is just selfish and it's wrong-headed, and I don't agree with it. But for Joe Blow, who works at Safeway as a manager, to go on Twitter and talk about how selfish all these NFL players are, that they don't want to go to their jobs and that they're going to opt out, and that he doesn't get an option to opt out. He needs to go and work at his store and he needs to run it. Dude, your position is not the same as theirs. Again, like I said, these guys are in high-profile jobs. Not everybody can play in the NFL. Most people, as we've seen, can't. There's people in the NFL right now who can't play in the NFL. The teams just haven't figured out that they can't play yet. They're just kind of holding a spot until someone else shows that they can play better than them. These high-profile jobs, they come with certain benefits, but then at the same time, can we be very clear about the difference between the NFL and working behind a desk, working at a grocery store? Can we be very clear about the difference here? In the NFL, what do? They play a high-contact sport. And it's reported these guys, they put their bodies through the equivalent of a car crash. These guys hit play after play after play for 3 hours. Sweat, blood, tears, spit, everything is going to be flying. You know what that basically, you know what that makes? That makes for a petri dish for COVID-19. When you're working as a manager at a store, are you tackling people? Are you sweating all over people? Are you guys spitting on each other? Is there the risk of the injuries that there are in football? Hell no, they're not. Absolutely not. Your situation and your job is so different, it is ridiculous to even attempt to compare the two. The thing that I am okay with people comparing is the fact that they're taking a pay cut. These athletes should also take a pay cut. And you know what? They all are taking a pay cut to an extent. Obviously, these guys, they're making more, so their pay cut, they're still going to be making more than most of your average day people. That's just kind of how it works. Again, that's the perks of having a high profile job. If you don't like it, go get that job. If you don't like it, go play. If you're not gonna, don't complain. It is that simple. But Deion Sanders, of course, one of the greatest NFL players of all time. You could probably argue he is a top 5 NFL player in general, not just the best cornerback in NFL history. He had a set of tweets come out on the 7th that are very interesting. Very, very interesting. So, the 7th, what was that? That was Friday. So the day right after the, NFL opt-out deadline. Deion Sanders, he had these things to say. He said, all players opting out in all sports, please believe the game will go on without you. This is a business, and don't you ever forget that. There's no one that's bigger than the game itself. Only the ref, umps, and officials are that important that you can't play without them, not you. #truth. I'm much more concerned with everyday men and women doing what they have to do to make ends meet. Most people have no option of choosing to go to work or stay in the comfort and safety of their environment. Have you forgotten your parents and family members can't opt out? #truth. So here's the deal with Deion. I understand what he's saying, and what he's saying technically is true. There is no player bigger than the sport, especially when it comes to football. But my question to Deion is, what was the point of these tweets? I mean, what was the point of these tweets? Are you trying to imply that players are opting out thinking that they're more important than the sport? Are you implying that guys who are opting out are thinking that the sport can't go on without them, or they're a very big integral part? I mean, like, what is the point of the tweet? This tweet would make sense if like, I don't know, if Russell Wilson opted out and he came out and he said that he didn't feel like he should have to play for the NFL this season because, you know, he has a lot of money and he's fine. I don't know. If he said something that was like really selfish, then okay, maybe Deion's tweet would be worth it. But him just tweeting this out of nowhere doesn't make any sense to me. Again, like, I understand, right? There's people out there, they cannot technically opt out of their work. They need to either go to work or they're probably going to be fired. Their jobs have obviously put in certain health recommendations. Wearing a mask, you're wiping down surfaces on the counter, you know, minutely almost, I'd say. Like every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes, these guys are cleaning counters, they're wiping things down, everyone's keeping their distance. There's certain protocols that are being put in place, and there's even protocols being put in for the NFL. But at the end of the day, again, Deion, have you forgotten, as a celebrity, you get certain privileges. And is it always fair? No. But you know what? Life isn't fair. If there's anything I have learned, it is that life itself is not fair, right? Some people, they just get certain benefits that others do not. Some of these NFL players, they were given an option. You can either play this year in what could end up being a petri dish for COVID-19, or you can go home, not play at all this season, and depending on your reason, you either get $150,000 or you get $350,000. And that's all you get. Make it last. Do whatever it is you're going to do with it. But that's what you get. You're not playing. And what is it? About 70 players said, I'm going to go ahead and do that. Some of these guys, I'm sure, next season, they probably won't have a job. Some of these guys, I am sure, their team might even look at whoever starts for them this year. They might like them more. They might say, you know what, actually, we don't want you anymore. And they might cut them. Or they might look to trade some of these guys. Some of these guys, I think I saw, like Russell Okung, he didn't decide to opt out, but he's mulling retirement. This is a bigger deal. Your feelings about these players opting out, and I'm not necessarily talking about Deion, I'm talking about just any of these fans who have a problem with it. Your feelings about these fans opting out mean squat. This is about health. This is about their health. This is about who they could possibly infect. These are the kinds of things that these guys are talking about. These are the kind of things that these guys are taking into consideration. And there are players who still aren't sure they want to play. There are players who have said they needed more time. They just weren't sure. Things are going to continue to change. There is no bubble in the NFL. The NBA, they have solved COVID. Basically, for the time being, they've solved it. No positive tests. The MLB, where there's no bubble, they're struggling right now. They're canceling games left and right. Obviously, some of the teams, they're coming back and they're cleaned of COVID, but then there's other guys who are testing positive for COVID. The NFL could run into the same exact problem. It's just the average fan of the NFL. Look, you love the sport. I love the sport. I want to watch football. I want to watch the best players in the world, but I also know my concerns about COVID are some of these guys' concerns about COVID, and they don't want to play. I don't know what I'd do in their situation, but I sure as hell know I can't compare my situation to theirs. If they don't want to play, they don't want to play. Tre'Davious, he decided, maybe against the better wishes of his girlfriend, maybe they agreed that it was okay, I don't know. But he decided to go ahead and play. And you got fans out here calling him selfish for even considering not playing. That doesn't make any sense. It really doesn't. It doesn't make any sense to me. This is an individual choice thing. Some people are opting out because of who they could possibly affect. Some people are opting out because of their own concerns. Some people are opting out literally because they're at higher risk. At the end of the day, it is a personal decision. Do not try and equate your situation when your job doesn't nearly have the risk factors, injury-wise or COVID-wise. Alright, unless at your job you're tackling sweaty people and your job is a petri dish for COVID, just your opinion, sorry to say, doesn't really matter. I understand you want to watch sports, I want to watch sports too, but I also just believe in human decency, and I am not about to call anyone selfish for not wanting to risk getting COVID this year. Anyways, coming up next, we're going to get into an even more touchier subject involving former Washington running back Derrius Guice and some domestic violence issues. I'm going to talk about that coming up next, but stay tuned. My final topic of the day, I'm going to get into my top 10. I'm going to predict the top 10 NFL offenses for this coming NFL season. Stay tuned. That is later.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment talked a little bit about Tre'Davious White and Deion Sanders. Deion Sanders, he made some comments about players opting out that they did not agree with. And as for Tre'Davious White, he was getting a bunch of hate for even relatively considering opting out. He, of course, chose not to. But again, look, COVID-19 is not a political issue. And it shouldn't be a political issue. COVID-19 does not care if you're a Republican, a Democrat, neutral. It doesn't matter. It doesn't care what you are. All it cares about is, can it infect you? That's all it cares about. Wearing a mask shouldn't be a political issue. It should just be a decency human rights issue. And unfortunately for some, it's not. Look, at the end of the day, whether a player decides to play or opt out, I don't think that players deserve any more praise. I don't think that they deserve any backlash. They make the decision that's best for them and their family. For some of them, it's not worth it to play because they're more susceptible to get it. For some of them, they might not be more susceptible to get it, but they're worried about their family. And then for some of them, they're gonna go play. For the ones who aren't playing, they're taking a major pay cut. For the ones that are playing, sure, I mean, they're getting their money, but they're willing to risk it. At the end of the day, it's an individual decision. And I just think we need to leave it at that. They don't deserve any harsh critique. I don't think they need any more praise for playing. If they play, they play. If they don't, they don't. And that's just it. But anyways, so, man, 2020. It has been a really, really rough year for Washington, D.C., hasn't it? I don't just mean on the sports side. I mean in general. Washington, D.C. has taken a pounding this year. Whether it be, the Wizards aren't good. Washington, D.C., obviously the White House is there. They're taking a pounding because of how America has responded to COVID. And then, of course, with the Washington football team, they had to change their name. In the midst of all of Black Lives Matter and all the movement, people decided to also shift their attention to the Washington football team. And they basically said, hey, are we now finally going to address their name? Like, can we make these people change the name of this team? And then, of course, FedEx said, we're going to take our name off of the stadium if you do not change the name of your team. Multiple sponsors said they're going to pull their sponsorships if they don't change the name of their team. Dan Snyder, of course, is on record back in 2013, I believe, having said, basically, that he will never change the name of the team. Over his dead body, you can put that in caps, he will never change the team, and of course now 2020 he is going to change the name, and they have. They are going to decide on a official name and logo at a later date, but for the time being they are now the Washington football team. Okay. Not the best name in the world, but it is what it is, right? It's a good filler name, at least for now. Everyone's going to be wearing, there's no more logo, really. I think if anything, the logo was just kind of a W, but I think the reports are even that the players are going to wear their numbers on their helmets, so just kind of like they do it at some of the colleges, so it should be fine, right? The most important thing is that they changed the name of the team, because whether or not you want to admit it, whether or not you want to call it a racial slur or whatever, it is a slur that was used against an ethnic group of people, Native Americans, because when Europeans, when they came in and when they took over the country, basically, they slaughtered millions of Native Americans. And the name was used for a scalped Native American. And so to name a team that is really strange. And even though I understand to the people that say, they don't think of a Native American when they hear that name, there's enough Native Americans out there that it bothers to where, go ahead and get rid of it. And so the important thing is that they have gotten rid of it. But on top of all of this that Washington, D.C. has had to deal with, on top of all the garbage that the football team specifically has had to deal with over the last few years, Derrius Guice, who was a second-round pick of theirs back in 2018, he was looked at as being a steal in the second draft. He was supposed to be one of the prototypical running backs these days that could really fit today's game, being a pass catcher and being a runner. Derrius Guice missed his entire rookie year. He played 5 games this past season, and now he is no longer on the team because he is being charged with domestic violence. And the report is really ugly. So Ian Rappaport, NFL insider, he had tweeted out on the 7th that Washington running back Derrius Guice faces 1 count of strangulation, which is a felony, 3 counts of assault and battery, and 1 count of destruction of property and I'm probably going to mispronounce this, but I think it's Loudoun County. I'm not entirely sure, but he had turned himself into authorities that afternoon. And as we have seen with the NFL and with these teams, they are always very hesitant to cut a player or do anything of the sorts until they know for sure it happened. And they did this on the day of. So I'm guessing that it happened. Right? I mean, Ezekiel Elliott, he got caught up in a bit of a mess. With Washington, they didn't cut him immediately. With Kareem Hunt and the Chiefs didn't cut him immediately until the video came out and they saw that he had lied to them, and then they cut him. I haven't seen a video or anything come out of Derrius Guice, but I'm assuming there is enough evidence, or I guess he admitted to the team that he did it because they went ahead and said, alright, yeah, you're gone. And that's the right decision to make. I firmly believe it is the right thing to do. Washington, that football team, they do not need any more controversy surrounding them. They're dealing with enough already this year. I do not believe they need that kind of dark cloud hanging over them. Derrius Guice hasn't done really anything for them. He was going into his 3rd year, having only played 5 games. He has shown to be injury prone so far in his career. He does kind of now leave Washington with essentially Adrian Peterson, or who's it, Peyton Barber? I mean, really, they don't necessarily have a standout back anymore, but hey, more carries for Adrian Peterson. I like to see it. Nonetheless, the NFL, when people think of domestic violence in the NFL, most people immediately go to Ray Rice. And Ray Rice's case was not handled correctly, I believe, by the NFL, right? When Ray Rice's situation went down, he was indicted and everything for 3rd-degree assault charges, and the NFL's punishment for that was a 2-game suspension. And that was it. That was what they thought was a good punishment for him. Now, the Ravens ended up cutting him, and then Ray Rice, he filed some grievance against the Ravens, basically stating that he thought he was wrongfully terminated because the NFL gave him a punishment. Let's be honest. If you've seen the video, 2 games was not enough. 2 games was not enough for what he did. But after that incident, he never played another down in the NFL. You look at what happened. Let's go to Kareem Hunt, right? With the Chiefs. With Kareem Hunt, I think it also took place in a hotel, but he and a woman, they were fighting. She was knocked down to the ground, and then when Kareem Hunt had every opportunity to walk away and to not do anything, he instead went back and he kicked her a few times while she was on the ground. So it wasn't necessarily domestic violence, more as it was just assault against a woman. And the Chiefs immediately cut him. He was put on the commissioner's exempt list. He basically went on an apology tour that year, went to anger management, did what he had to do. The Browns signed him, and he has been with the Browns since then over the past 2 seasons, going into his 3rd year, I believe, with the Browns now. You look at, like, Greg Hardy, right? Greg Hardy, another guy, was getting indicted in front of a grand jury. It was getting time for the trial to come up, and then the woman just never showed up because some hush money got slid over to her, and from that point, he never ever played another down in the NFL. And now he's actually a UFC fighter, and he's actually pretty good. So hey, you know what? As long as he's using his fists and his feet against other people that can actually defend themselves in an octagon, then hey, have at it. Go ahead and fight people, but just don't do it to a random person or your significant other ever again. Some people, they might think of Joe Mixon. What happened to Joe Mixon before he got into the NFL, right? It was a terrible video. It was horrifying. He cold-cocked a woman in a restaurant. I don't know if it was a bar or not, but in a restaurant, and completely knocked her out cold. I think broke her jaw, knocked out some teeth of hers, and it all stemmed from some argument they were having. I think Joe Mixon, he of course said, that she started it and that she was saying crazy things to him and it got him angry or whatever, and he went ahead and he cold-cocked her. And from that point on, though, give it to Joe Mixon. Since he's entered the NFL, he hasn't had a misstep. He has been a model citizen with Cincinnati. I believe after this season, he should be looking at a contract extension. He's in the final year of his deal. He was picked in the second round. So even that, they say that the Bengals, they basically got a steal in the second round. But the thing was his baggage. In the Bengals, they've never necessarily, I would say they've never been afraid to take a troublesome player with a bit of baggage to them. Vontaze Burfict always comes to mind. But Mixon has been a model citizen since he came into the NFL, which I think is what you always hope happens when someone has ever had something as terrible as that in their past. That they learn from it, and that they never repeat it. And that's what Mixon does. So I'm very interested to see if the Bengals do offer him a contract extension. I would assume they would, but then again, we just think about the running back market. Not the most friendly to running backs right now. And then, of course, I think one of the biggest debacles in the NFL in recent memory is what happened to Ezekiel Elliott, right? So, with all these cases that have been going on, a thing that the NFL was always criticized for is that they seemed to react so slowly, especially when it came to, like, the Ray Rice situation, right? The NFL did not punish him hard enough. When it came to, like, Greg Hardy, the NFL just did not seem to punish him hard enough. They reacted so slowly to everything. And I think it's because what the NFL didn't want to do is they didn't want to react and then have it come back and blow up in their face. But so then there's that thing you kind of have to argue with, right? Do you take the right side, which it might depend on how you look at the situation, but do you take the right side of things and do you condemn domestic violence? Do you suspend the guy for the time being until the case is decided? Do you put them on the exempt list? What do you do? And I think one of the biggest debacles in recent memory is what happened to Ezekiel Elliott. For those of you who don't remember what happened to Ezekiel Elliott, in his second year, he had his ex-girlfriend came out and accused him of domestic violence. 5 different accounts of domestic violence. And when that whole thing was going on, remember, they had a female, they had a female investigator basically come in who, her job was to interview both Ezekiel Elliott and her, and from her reports, she did not think that Ezekiel Elliott's ex-girlfriend was credible. She thought that her statements didn't add up. She wasn't keeping her story straight. There were text messages that were uncovered from her that did not make her look good, and she didn't think anything should happen to Ezekiel Elliott. But even with the NFL bringing her in to literally handle domestic violence cases, right, that was her job in the NFL. Even with her job to handle domestic violence cases, the NFL, for whatever reason, didn't really listen to her. And they decided, no, we're still going to suspend him. And then it went to, and then it was bouncing back and forth between all these courts, and, a federal judge, granted, a request for an injunction. And then it went to the Fifth Circuit, and they said that they were going to reinstate it. And then it goes to someone else, and they said, no, we're going to put it on hold again. Because all these people, there were those who said there was not enough evidence. There were those that said, no, there's enough evidence. And it all of a sudden came down to the thought of opinion. It almost seemed to come down to just, do you want to believe him or not? And I think a lot of people held the video of him pulling the woman that he was with, pulling a woman's shirt down or pulling it up on St. Patty's Day, I believe it was, which of course, never great. She didn't look like she necessarily enjoyed it, even though she did then pull her shirt up herself. I think she would rather have done it herself and not had Ezekiel Elliott do it, which is totally understandable. But it was just a whole mess. It dragged out through the season. Eventually, Ezekiel Elliott served a 6-game suspension, and he still holds to this day to this belief that he did nothing and that the NFL messed up. Jerry Jones was furious with the NFL and the fact that they were suspending him because of how they handle it. Because he as well didn't think there was anything to really hold against Ezekiel Elliott. It was investigated by these police stations, and of course, that's a controversy now in of itself nowadays, whether or not you want to believe the police stations and their investigations. But the police didn't find anything. 2 separate police stations didn't find anything. It was a whole mess. But I think what the NFL was trying to do was they were trying to be on the right side. They were trying to react to these things appropriately because they had so underreacted in the past, they could not do it again. But in the process of trying to get it right, I think they tried so hard that they got it wrong. Right? I mean, you hire a woman who her specialty is these kind of cases, you put her in charge of these things, and then you basically said, all right, here, investigate it. She does. She comes back with her findings, and the NFL went, oh, okay, well, this is what we're going to go with. And they just completely ignored everything that she came to see. Her opinion should have been priority number one. And it seemed like the NFL, because of the fact that she found, she was basically finding Ezekiel Elliott not guilty. I don't know, maybe the NFL just wanted to make an example out of Elliott. I honestly have no clue. But depending on who you ask, there's those who believe that Ezekiel Elliott should have served the suspension. There's those who believe he did something. There's those who believe he didn't. Looking at the reports and at the case and everything, I have to lean with it doesn't seem like Ezekiel Elliott did anything, but nonetheless, the NFL was trying to do the right thing. And I think at this point in time, at least with the way that they're handling this Derrius Guice situation, the way that Washington specifically is handling it, I think they're doing the right thing, right? I think that the Chiefs did the right thing by letting go of Kareem Hunt. I think that the Ravens did the right thing when they let go of Ray Rice. I think that Washington did the right thing letting go of Derrius Guice. I think that the Cowboys did a good job not letting go of Ezekiel Elliott because there just didn't seem to be enough evidence. And he served the suspension, he's been back, and he hasn't had really an off-field misstep unless you want to count such things as the party that he and Dak supposedly threw during COVID-19. I think that the NFL is moving in the right direction when it comes to these cases. I still think there are some kinks to work out. I want to see what happens the next time that they have another situation like this come about. But it's like Ezekiel Elliott's situation, where the investigators or whoever is in charge doesn't think the other person is credible. I want to see what happens then, because I want to see if the NFL has learned anything from their Ezekiel Elliott case. But in terms of what's going on with Derrius Guice, hey, I don't know what's going to happen to him. I hope that he gets help. I hope that he pays for what he did, because what he did sounds disgusting. And he should pay for it. He should definitely serve some jail time. I think he needs to go to counseling. I think he needs to go to anger management. He needs to figure out why it is that he would do such a thing to somebody, especially, it's someone that is your significant other, your partner. You know, how anyone can treat your significant other that way is beyond me. How anyone could go to strangle their partner is just, I can't fathom it. I don't even want to know what kind of mental state you have to get into. I hope she's okay, and I hope that Derrius Guice does get help. First, I hope he pays for what he did, and I hope that he gets help so that he never does that to somebody else again. And you can just hope that he learns his lesson the way that a Kareem Hunt did, the way that a Joe Mixon did, the way that a Ray Rice did, because Ray Rice, since all of that went down back in 2014, he has been a model citizen and really hasn't had a misstep. He's been very charitable, done a lot of talks about domestic violence. He and his wife are still together, so you just hope that Derrius Guice can turn his life around. Anyways, coming up next, final topic of the day, I am going to predict the top 10 offenses for this coming NFL season. Stay tuned, final segment of the day, next.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment talked about Derrius Guice and his domestic violence issues, the domestic violence issues in the NFL in general. I think that the NFL is getting better at handling these things. I really do. I think they really fumbled it with the Ezekiel Elliott issue. I think they were trying to overcorrect. I agree with Washington cutting Derrius Guice, and what I hope that happens is, one, I hope that he gets the proper punishment for what he did, because what he did is gross. And then what I really hope for is that he moves towards bettering himself, righting his wrongs, and that he can move forward trying to figure out, getting therapy and anger management counseling to figure out why it is that he could bring himself to do something so terrible. I do believe, though, he is going to get a serious sentence, because what he did, the strangulation part of it especially, is a felony. Nonetheless, let's get into a little bit more of a positive topic, shall we? So, I love lists. I do a list every podcast, and I went ahead and I ranked what I believe are going to be the top 10 offenses in the NFL. Gave them the ranking and everything. I don't really have any totals for like how many yards they're going to have or anything like that, but I looked back at the offenses from last year. I kind of looked at what they added. Some of it I tied into what the scheduling is going to be, and I have what I believe is going to be the top 10 offenses. Some of these might shock you where I have them placed. I have some teams in here that I don't think anyone would even imagine would end up being in the top, but nonetheless, here we go. I'm going to start at number 1 because I believe that starting at number 1 is just, it's kind of obvious who would be number 1 or number 2, so we're just going to go ahead and start there and work our way up to number 10. So, at number 1, I have the Ravens. I think the Ravens are going to repeat, right? I'm not one of these people who think that you can just solve Lamar Jackson. Last year, the Ravens had north of 3,000 yards rushing and north of 3,000 yards passing. Actually, I think in both categories, they had 3,200 plus. They were the first team in the NFL to ever do that. They were the number 1 scoring offense. Lamar Jackson is a cheat code, right? It's not like these defenses don't know what the Ravens aren't going to do every game. They know Lamar Jackson's going to run it a few times. They know he's going to throw it a few times, and they still can't stop him because there's only so much you can do when it comes to speed and agility. Unless Lamar Jackson gets hurt and his mobility becomes severely hampered, I have no problem saying that the Ravens are once again going to repeat as the top offense. I believe that they will take it at number 1. At number 2, I have the 49ers. Now, this one is a bit more difficult because the Niners do have a really, really tough schedule. They have a top 10 schedule. I think it might even be top 5. But my thing with the Niners is that they had a pretty decent schedule even this past season, and they still made some of these teams look ridiculous. Right? I mean, they did whatever they wanted with the Saints. They did really whatever they wanted with Seattle. They did whatever they wanted with Green Bay. They did whatever they wanted with every single team. They had the Chiefs on the run in the Super Bowl, really until Jimmy Garoppolo, I guess I should say, until Kyle Shanahan stopped running the football again and decided to put the ball in Jimmy Garoppolo's hands. Look, they were the number 2 scoring offense last year, and that's while being run-centric, run-heavy. Their offensive line, you could say, maybe is even better this season. They traded for Trent Williams, who I believe is even an upgrade over Joe Staley. They still have their running backs there, even though they did trade away Matt Breida. They still got Coleman. They still have Mostert, who is happy now with a contract extension. Maybe they'll get Jerick McKinnon in. I don't know. Obviously, they drafted the first-round wide receiver. I don't like them losing Travis Benjamin and Emmanuel Sanders. I think that's going to hurt them, but I just think Kyle Shanahan is too creative of a play caller. Their running game is just it seems to be impossible to figure out. So I have no problem saying that the 49ers, even with a tougher schedule, they are probably going to be the number 2 offense in the NFL. At number 3, and I could have flipped these two, but I put the Saints. Speaking of Emmanuel Sanders, the Saints now have Emmanuel Sanders. He is a great number 2 to Michael Thomas. They are a well-rounded team. They run the football, they pass the football. It's the same kind of thing as the Ravens in the 49ers. I think that one of the keys to being a top offense is to be very well-rounded, to not tire out your QB's arm, and to not pound the football until your running backs are falling apart. Kamara is a great 1-2 punch over there with Murray. Drew Brees, I think that this rest he is getting this offseason, with the fact that they haven't been training the way that they normally do, there won't be preseason or anything like that, I think that this is going to bode very well for Drew Brees' arm, because it was very obvious last season he was getting a bit tired. He had to take a little bit more of a running start on some of his long balls, but the thing is he's still a very accurate passer. I think that having Sanders there is going to be very helpful for him. Their offensive line is still good. They have a very, very easy schedule, right? I think their schedule is 30th in the NFL. So that's why I say I could have probably flipped them with the Niners, because obviously the addition of some weapons there, as well as the fact that their schedule is far easier than the Niners. But I kind of give it to the Niners when it comes to their scoring and their run game. So I put them a little bit above, but I have the Saints at number 3. I really do think this rest for Drew Brees' arm is going to be pivotal. And number 4, I have the Chiefs. Look, it's Mahomes, right? I mean, Mahomes, he never seems to be out of a game. This dude can throw for 304 touchdowns in his sleep. They still have Tyreek Hill. They got McCole Hardman, who was actually the highest graded receiver by Pro Football Focus in single man coverage. You know who number 2 was? Tyreek Hill. They still got Sammy Watkins. They still got Travis Kelce. I think their running back situation might be even better now that Damian Williams has opted out of the season. I think that Edwards-Helaire might be even better, a more explosive back to have when it comes to running and catching the football. Their offensive line did take a hit losing Duvernay-Tardif, but I don't think it's going to be too serious because Mahomes is a force multiplier who makes everybody better. Andy Reid is an amazing play caller and schemer. Same thing with Sean Payton. Same thing with Kyle Shanahan. So I got them, 2, 3, and 4. I've got the Chiefs at number 4. I think that the other teams have a bit more to work with, especially in their run games, than the Chiefs do. Of course, we have seen the run game is not necessarily as pivotal to be a successful team, but I do think that I do still think that the running game has its importance. I have the Chiefs at number 4. And number 5, and this is a little bit tougher, but I have the Cowboys. And the reason why I have the Cowboys there is just because of the sheer amount of talent on their team, right? So obviously, they have arguably three really good wide receivers. Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup were 1,000-yard receivers last year, respectively. There's people who think they have a chance to have 3 1,000-yard receivers. I don't know if I'm going to say that, but I can definitely see Cooper, Gallup getting 1,000 again, and then CeeDee Lamb maybe having close, maybe 800, 900 yards, something like that. I'm not sure. I need to wait and see how the offense looks, but obviously they still have Zeke there. They have a good 1-2 punch there. I can't remember for the life of me at the moment what their backup running back's name is. It might come to me in a little bit, so just give me some time. But I like the fact that they kept Kellen Moore. If Kellen Moore is still going to be calling plays, I can see this offense being in the top 10. I don't know how it's going to work. I don't know if Mike McCarthy's going to do it, because that would be my knock, would be that it's a new offense, new verbiage. I don't know how that's going to work, but I still like their offensive line, even though they lost Travis Frederick, which is huge. But they still got Zach Martin, Lyle Collins. They still got Tyron Smith, even though he is a bit older and he seems to get hurt every single year. But I like all the pieces around Dak. I like the fact that they now actually have a tight end that can run and separate, giving Jarwin the starting role with Witten being gone. And they have a really, really easy schedule. The core is still there. Dak is motivated on a franchise tag. I think that this offense is going to be great. Now, will it translate into wins? I have no clue. because the Cowboys were the number one offense last year, and 8-8. They didn't really perform well down the stretch. It seemed like Dak put up a lot of empty numbers, but I do believe that this Cowboy offense can definitely have the ability to repeat, to repeat to be a top 10 offense again this coming season. At number 6, I have Tampa Bay. Not Tampa Bay, Tampa Bay. I've been very, very critical of people thinking that the Buccaneers are going to be one of the top teams in the NFL simply because I look at quarterbacks' histories with Bruce Arians, and you see every quarterback their first year with Bruce Arians is number one in the league in turnover-worthy plays because he is a risk-it-no-biscuit guy, right? It's a bombs-away style offense. Is he going to change that for Tom Brady? I'm honestly not sure. I'm not a Tampa Bay insider. I haven't been watching their practices. I have no clue what it's going to look like. But what I do know is this. According to early reports, it seems like Tom Brady and these receivers are clicking. And Tom Brady is working hard to get in a rhythm with these guys. If this is true, and Tampa Bay had 2,000-yard receivers last year, they got 2 tight ends that I know are good with Gronk and Cameron Brate, and you have a wild card in O.J. Howard. They have a good offensive line. LaShawn McCoy, I honestly believe, could be their starting running back, and he's rested. I still think LaShawn McCoy can play, even though he is older. Don't give him 25 carries a game or anything like that, but I definitely think you can throw it to him and run him, maybe upmost to 20 times a game, 15. And, again, it's Tom Brady. Right? I mean, it's Tom Brady. He's motivated. He wants to prove to everybody that he's the reason that the Patriots had the success that they did and that it wasn't all Bill Belichick. I think Tom Brady's going to come out and try his damnedest to make this thing work. Even though the offseason has been a bit funky, I'm going to have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at number 6. At number 7, I have the Seattle Seahawks, and my number one reason as to why is because they need to be top 10. Their defensive line is the worst in the NFL. By far and away, it is the worst in the league. And while they can go ahead and scheme pressure by blitzing, then they're going to leave other parts of their defense vulnerable. Pete Carroll played base defense the most in the NFL last year at 69%. The next closest was 38%, and that belonged to the Cardinals. So obviously, there's a bit of a coaching mismatch there. Pete Carroll has been very, very slow to change as compared to the rest of the league. Because if the next closest was 38%, what the hell are the other teams doing? 20? 15? I mean, my goodness. It is ridiculous. So, if Pete Carroll's going to play defense the way I believe he will, then the Seahawks need to be a top 10 offense. They're going to get their running backs back. Obviously, Chris Carson, Rashad Penny, they're going to get their top 2 back. DK Metcalf will be in year 2. I'm interested to see how he looks with another year under his belt. Greg Olsen is now there, and he's probably the best tight end that Russell Wilson has ever had. No disrespect to Jimmy Graham, but his time in Seattle was not exactly memorable. Obviously, they get Will Dissly back, who Russell Wilson seems to love. And he got injured last year, early in the year, but they get him back. And they have an interesting offensive line. Seattle made some additions in the offseason that I think are interesting to say the least, as in how it is that they'll fit in. Where do they place some guys? And there's a guy, BJ Finney, who I'm very interested to see because when he was with the Steelers, he actually had some flashes of being a pretty solid offensive lineman. I'm very curious to see this, but Russell Wilson, he is, the second best quarterback, however it is you want to place him between he and Mahomes in the NFL. He's amazing. He makes everything just seem to work. He's a force multiplier. Russell Wilson is simply phenomenal. I think that this could really be the year Russell Wilson does win the MVP. At number 8, I have the Cleveland Browns. Now, my thing with teams like the Cleveland Browns, like Tampa Bay, like the Cowboys, is that there's an important aspect of the team that has changed. With the Cowboys, new head coach. With Tampa Bay, new quarterback. With the Browns, new head coach and new play caller, right? And I think it's kind of the same thing with the Cowboys. I don't know how this is going to work, especially with training camp and everything being as fuzzy as it's been. But Kevin Stefanski, he likes to use 2 tight ends. He did in Minnesota. That is something that the Browns have in Njoku and in Austin Hooper. They have 2,000-yard receivers with Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham, and Odell and Landry are healthy this season. They have a much improved offensive line. They still have Nick Chubb, who was graded as the best running back in the NFL last season. They still have Kareem Hunt, who is very good despite his limited touches. He is a very good NFL player and can definitely step right in if something was to happen to Nick Chubb and be an effective running back. I like their defense, kinda, but again, this isn't really about the defense. But I do believe that their offense just has too many pieces. It fits what Stefanski likes to do too much for it to not work. I think that, though I think they might be on the lesser end of the top 10, I believe they can be a top 10 offense. I have them at number 8. And also, Baker Mayfield, he's going to be motivated this year. Because if it doesn't work, if Baker looks like he did last year, he's going to be in a quarterback competition this coming season. They signed Case Keenum to a 3-year deal. Stefanski likes Case Keenum. He worked with Case Keenum. If Baker doesn't look good this year, he could be in a battle with Case Keenum. And number 9, and this might be one that's kind of caught some people off guard, I have the Colts. The Colts this season have the best offensive line. When Phillip Rivers has protection, look out. When Phillip Rivers is protected and doesn't have to worry about pass rushers getting to him because he is not mobile, Phillip Rivers is not going to run anywhere. But when he has protection, Phillip Rivers is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Big time throws, his deep ball, and he's phenomenal. Is he a bit of a turnover machine? Yes, but he's more of a turnover machine when he doesn't have protection. From left tackle to right tackle, the Colts are solid. They still have T.Y. Hilton. They've got some other interesting receivers. They drafted Michael Pittman. They drafted Jonathan Taylor, who were 2 guys that were looked at as being late round stars. They got both of them. And I think Rivers is really motivated. I do not think Phillip Rivers likes how last season went. And the Chargers, they basically said, thanks, but no thanks. Goodbye. We don't want to bring you back. The Colts said, okay, we'll take him. And Phillip Rivers, he is going to do way better than Jacoby Brissett, because at least Phillip Rivers will throw the ball down the field to T.Y. He will throw the ball down the field. They have good tight ends, Jack Doyle. I think, they even outside of Jonathan Taylor, they have a good running back stable with a Himes and Marlon Mack. So I'm interested to see how this offense looks. I think that the Colts could be a very sneaky good offense, especially just the main step is that they have the best offensive line in football. I think that is the biggest factor. When you give Phillip Rivers time and protection, he's as deadly as anybody in the NFL. Now, will he make it past this season? I don't quite know. He doesn't seem to have exactly the arm that he once did. It's kind of the same deal with Drew Brees, but I do believe that Phillip Rivers with protection is going to be able to at least take these Colts to the playoffs. And at number 10, I have the Rams. Now, I still do not like the Rams' offensive line. That is the one area of this team that I really think they are going to need to monitor. And they got a few guys that they need to pay this coming off season. They got to pay Cooper Kupp. They got to pay Robert Woods. They got to pay Jalen Ramsey. They've got some dudes to take care of, and their offensive line is not getting any better. Whitworth, though he did re-up with the team, he is an older left tackle. I think he's the oldest tackle in football. He could retire at any second. Their right tackle, Havenstein, he took a significant step back this past season. He was not nearly the player he was the season that the Rams went to the Super Bowl. I still don't like their offensive line, but I just think, given Sean McVay, and given the talent that they have at tight end, at receiver, and even at running back, despite the fact that Gurley is no longer there, I think that they still will have a good offense. Even last season, their offense was still pretty solid. It was just that Goff was a turnover machine, and that he had no protection. Todd Gurley didn't look the same, and the Rams just weren't able to win some of their bigger games. Right? Their defense was being out there too long. And teams were just able to take advantage of them or take advantage of Jared Goff giving them a short field. I think that just given Sean McVay's his brilliance for offense and him getting to see how last season went. I think he can draw up some plays to make it a bit easier for Jared Goff, maybe some moving pockets, different things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and say that the Rams will be at number 10. Now, I'm not saying that these teams are all going to be in the playoffs, all right? That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that I just believe that these could be the teams that have top 10 offenses. There are some other teams I was kind of leery on. I thought maybe Atlanta would be able to get back into the top 10 again because I believe last year they were a top 10 offense as well as in terms of yardage. But I'm not sure what I'm going to get from Atlanta this year. You know, them losing Devontae Freeman, replacing him with Todd Gurley. Maybe you'd say it's an upgrade. I'm not entirely sure. I don't like the fact that they lost Austin Hooper. I think he is far better than Hayden Hurst. So, we'll see how that all works out. Their offensive line still isn't really that good. So I just didn't want to put Atlanta though in the top 10. For teams like Green Bay, I don't really like their offense outside of Aaron Jones and Devontae Adams. I know what I'm kind of going to get from Aaron Rodgers, and their offensive line is good, but it's really 2 weapons, and that's it. And I just don't know if that's going to be enough to give them a top 10 offense this season. But nonetheless, to reiterate my list, starting at number 1 to number 10, so I have the Ravens, 49ers, Saints, Chiefs, Cowboys, Tampa Bay, Seattle, Browns, Colts, and the Los Angeles Rams. I believe those will be the top 10 offenses this next season. I'm really interested to see when this NFL season does start, to actually see where do teams rank. I think there might be a shocker in there somewhere. There might be a team that absolutely just explode. I mean, in the NBA bubble, the Suns right now are like the only undefeated team, which is a shocker to some people. I'm trying to figure out, is there a young team, or is there a team in the NFL that could come out and just blow people away? I don't know, could the Jets maybe do it? Probably not. But, could the Bills come out? Could Josh Allen, have taken a step in his accuracy, and could he look phenomenal? I have no clue. But I'm very interested to see what happens this coming season. But anyways, thank you for tuning in for to the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us out. Also, if you can, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you. And have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.